I'm a kid from the 90s, and growing up in the 90s, I was privileged with access to some of the greatest cinematic features of all time. And yes, I'm biased. But there were some big-name actors when I was growing up that you could reliably count on seeing about every other year on the big screen. And one of those actors was the Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I know some of the youngsters in this room are like, the politician? And I get it. I did the same thing with Ronald Reagan. It's weird, these things. Now, I was born a little too late for Terminator, but I do remember movies like Kindergarten Cop and his role as Mr. Freeze in the Batman movies. But one movie that really struck me when I was a kid was the movie, maybe you've seen it, called The Sixth Day. It was a sci-fi movie that toyed with the possibility of human cloning and all of the ethical dilemmas that would bring. And it took its title from the day of creation that you just got done hearing, the sixth day. In the movie, it begged this question, which was, what does it mean to be human? Is our humanness fundamentally what we look like, or how we feel, or is it the sound of our voice? In our day-to-day, that question is no less relevant, what it means to be human, especially with the advent of AI chatbots that look and not yet, look and sound remarkably like real humans. With the conversation in the counseling world about the possibility of AI therapists to be useful, and even some apps out there that you can get, religious apps that allow you to have a conversation with God. It's AI, don't be fooled. But these technologies are asking us the same kind of question. What does it mean to be human? And maybe what is the purpose of our humanness? Is it to see as far as we can get technologically speaking? Is it for the purpose of advancement? For the purpose of human achievement? What are we for? As we've said all along, these are the fundamental questions that the book of Genesis begin to answer for us. And so, what do our ancient spiritual ancestors have to say to us? Especially on the sixth day, the day concerned with our creation, with humanity. What does it mean to be human? And how does what they share direct our steps as we encounter the world that we live in today? Well, let's dive in. There were at least two striking things in the text that we had today. If you've been reading along this Genesis 1 creation account, that should cause you to pause or catch you by surprise. And they're both alluding to the same reality, just from two different sides. The first is, as you're reading through Genesis 1, you hear certain refrains, right? And God said, and God said, and God said. And each time as he's creating, whether it's the light or the stars in the sky or the vegetation, it's always God said. And he creates and he creates and he creates. But on day 6, the pronouns suddenly change. And then God said, let us make humanity, Adam, in our image, in our likeness. Why the pronoun shift? Well, some of you may say, well, of course, this is an allusion to the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity. And you'd be right. That's right. God is a plurality. He's a Trinity. But why particularly on the 6th day is this brought out? And do you realize how unique it is that it is brought out? Just comparatively to other religions in the world, right? So in the East, religions in the East are functionally impersonal. God is a spiritual force. And the idea is, in the East, if you follow those religions, when you die, you return to the all soul. And so you're like a drop that falls into the ocean. And if that happens, can you find the drop again? No. because we don't really have selves. This is an illusion. We're all just one, according to the religions of the East. So there really is not relationship as we understand it. Now, in the West, in the ancient world, you had multiple gods, and those gods had relationships with each other, but their relationship to humankind was accidental or condescending. You basically didn't want to interact with the pantheon of gods. It usually meant there was trouble for you. That was the case in some cultures, and then in others, there was just one God. But that means that in both the East and the West, relationships and love was always secondary. If there's only one God, one individual person, then he cannot love, he can't have a relationship until he creates. So love and relationships are derivative of creation, but they're not fundamental. But for the Christian, love and relationships are the fundamental thing. That is the focus. God himself is a community, the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And it's out of that love that all creation comes into existence. So we're created in that image. We see this same truth on the other side of the coin in chapter 2. And another striking characteristic of the text, because we've been hearing these refrains, right? God said, God created, and it was good. And it was good. And then all of a sudden in chapter 2, it's not good. God looks down and he sees Adam, and there's something wrong. Now, let me be clear. There's nothing that the Bible gives us to suggest that it's in the nature of God to make mistakes, all right? So it's not that God had some sort of accident in creation. But what does it mean? How is it possible that Adam in paradise can be unhappy, can be lonely? Well, it's because we're made in the image of a God who is not just a me, but who is an us. And therefore, we won't be happy until we're not just a me, but we're an us. We can't be our true selves just with ourselves. Maybe you start to see how this teaching comes directly into conflict with some of the ideas in our world today. Right? Our world where it's so easy to replace real human interaction with contrived communal experiences. Whether it's through an AI chatbot, or whether it's just in the echo chamber of whatever Reddit or Facebook group you belong to, where your individual opinion is only affirmed by the group and never challenged. How much easier is it to watch crafted sitcoms or so-called reality TV than it is to engage ourselves in it? The Cambridge Dictionary's 2025 word of the year this year is parasocial. Parasocial. It's defined as a relationship felt by someone between themselves and a famous person that they do not know. A one-way emotional attachment to a public figure, celebrity, influencer who doesn't know you exist. You feel close to them. You might know their voice, their habits, their humor, their values, but they don't know that you exist. The relationship can feel personal, but it's not mutual. It can feel intimate, but it's built on calculated exposure, not mutual vulnerability. And to all the youpers in the room who are like, hey, I'm not even on the internet, all right? There's no problem for me. Ask yourself, how do you feel about the increase in population in our area in recent years? Does it get you excited because it's allowing you to participate more fully in what it means to be human? Or do you get concerned that it's a threat to your existence? Genesis reveals to you and me, this is no threat to us. It's in fact what we're built for. It's what we need to really be human. to finally understand ourselves. And there's two different directions that Genesis gives us to be in relationship. The first is vertical. You were built to be in relationship with God. Well, what does that mean? That can be kind of hard to figure out. How do I be in relationship with God? What does it look like? It's instructive, again, to look at the creation story to get a picture. But this time, we're not going to take you to Genesis 1 or 2, or even to the Gospel of John like we did a couple weeks ago, that other retelling of the creation story, but a third place, Proverbs chapter 8. It's another place that retells the creation story, and it's another place where it's a plural retelling. There's multiple characters in creation. In this creation account, wisdom is personified. It's Jesus. Wisdom talks about participating in creation. But listen to what that looked like. Wisdom says in Proverbs chapter 8, I was beside him, God the Father, the Creator. I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his habited world and delighting in the children of man. The creative time for God wasn't stoic. God wasn't there, the bearded man in the sky, silently, albeit thoughtfully, painting his canvas. No, it was a community event. And there was laughter and rejoicing. That word rejoice in the Hebrew, it's the word shachach. So if you need to clear your throat, say shachach. And it means laughter. It means celebration. It can even be used to describe children playing in the streets. This is how the Bible describes God's creative work. It was a community event, one that was filled with love, a dance of sorts. The Trinity knowing and being known, loving and being loved, enjoying and being enjoyed. And then they say, let's make humanity in our image. Let's make these creatures able to join us in this dance. Let's make them able to give each other what we are giving each other. To love and to be loved. Praise and to be praised. To join in God's dance. This is what you're built for. But is that what anyone thinks when they think of religion? I don't think so. I think most people's idea of a relationship with God is basically, I got to go to church, maybe pass out a few bulletins, get involved. No offense to our ushers, love our ushers. We need bulletins passed out. Maybe I'll utter a few prayers, which are like messages in a bottle that I send out to sea, and who knows if I'll ever hear back. I'll try hard to be a good person, and hopefully it's enough. But maybe I'll never know. What a different picture Proverbs gives us. You were built to be in the arms of your Creator. You were built to be in the dance with Him, to overflow with the light of who He is. And you're called into an assurance of His love. Not a general, I'm trying to be good. I hope He likes me. I hope He lets me into heaven someday. That's not what we're talking about. You're invited to know that you're His joy and His delight. You're invited to give Him love and to sense His love. But there's a second relationship we also hear about. We've got the vertical and the horizontal. We're built to be in relationship with one another. And this is actually the way that God invites us to grow further in relationship with Him. Spiritual growth is not a solo journey. You can't grow into the image of God, who is a community, without a community. But there's a tendency in our modern culture to think that we can, to even imagine that it might be easier to grow into the image of God without all these people. There's a reason why, in our day, regular attendance as a churchgoer is considered once a month. That's considered regular. Shows the kind of devaluing of the worshipful community. And this is a cultural influence, right? Our culture tells us this all the time. Our culture says, you're not the problem. It's all those toxic relationships, you know? You got to get out of those. Get people out of your way. They're the thing bringing you down. This is not the message the Scriptures give us. The Scriptures tell us that we're to be in community. Hebrews 3:13, talking about the Christian community, says to exhort one another every day, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So the picture of the Christian community is one that you're so close with your brothers and sisters, probably not all of them. There's levels to this, like Jesus with his own disciples, right? There were tiers of that. But you're so close that you're able to let your hair down. A person's able, and even given permission by you, to acknowledge your flaws or the ways in which you're living or acting that doesn't align with Christ. Real relationships, not the online Facebook avatar that we've created. No, not the versions of ourselves we're able to craft so easily, but the real us. You ever notice that if you hear yourself on like a recording, you know, you play the tape back, that you'll say, oh, what? Who is that whiny voice? That doesn't sound anything like me, you know? But of course, if you're gathered there with other people that say, yeah, that sounds exactly like you, I can tell you, I hear you, you know, every other Sunday. We're not able to see ourselves fully by ourselves. We're not given a full picture of who we are. And moreover, we can't dive deeper into who God is without each other. In C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves, he writes about friendship. And in that section, he talks about a little friend group he had with a guy named Charles and Roland. This community of love, close friends. But then Charles passed away. And that was sad for C.S. Lewis, but he thought, well, at least I'll get more of Roland. But he discovered as time went on, he actually had less of Roland. Because Charles had his own unique personalities, characteristics that drew out parts of Roland that C.S. Lewis couldn't. In community, we draw out parts of each other that we just can't draw out ourselves or in a smaller shape. And if that's true of Roland, how much more is it true of Jesus Christ? I don't see God fully if it's just my view. We'll never see the real Jesus without seeing him in community. It's only together that we bear the image of God. Now, maybe hearing about this idea of church this morning makes you think, have I ever truly experienced God in community? I mean, this is a high bar for what it means to be the people of God. I think the bulletin thing was easier, you know? Let me be clear that this is according to Genesis 1, right? It is an idyllic picture. We're still in the garden. And we're going to move in a sermon series in the new year that'll explore more deeply why maybe you haven't experienced that or certainly don't experience it all the time. But I'm going to allude to it today because our text does. It was there in chapter 2 that we see the key to these kinds of relationships, the way towards experiencing God in community. First, we hear Adam say, as Eve is created, at last. This is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. At last. There's a sense of finality for Adam as he encounters Eve that we just don't have in our relationships, do we? Many of our relationships are superficial. Some of our relationships might be abusive. Even the best of our relationships are still breaking down all the time. Adam and Eve had something in the garden that we lost. But that which we can get back through Jesus Christ. And it was that final verse that said they were naked and were not ashamed. They weren't in control of what the other person saw. They weren't afraid of exposure. They didn't need to control or manufacture what the other person saw. They were completely at ease. They had a stable identity. They were known and yet loved. They were naked and yet unashamed. And the problem in this world is we can't do that. We have a choice. We can get love if we don't let people see our flaws. We can be unashamed but not naked, or we can be vulnerable and find ourselves being constantly rejected. Why is that? Because the minute Adam and Eve ate the fruit, the minute that they sinned, they started covering up. Right? They took the fig leaves and started covering up. Deep down, all of us know that we are flawed. Something is wrong with us, which is why we're always covering up. It's also why it's so validating to get praise from another person. If someone who we don't know, says, "Hey, I really like you," that's nice to hear. If someone who actually knows you says, "You're one of the finest people I've ever met," it's deeply moving. It can move you to tears. And so we need cover, but not the fickle fig tree coverage. Not our attempts to fool the world with our creations of our avatars, our ideas of who we are, which even pulls the wool over our own eyes at times, not realizing who we really are. We need a cover that comes from outside of us. And you know what happened when Jesus went to the cross for you? He was stripped. Not just of his righteousness, not just of his dignity. He was stripped of his clothes. He was naked. He was bared before the crowds, completely vulnerable. And he did that for you. But didn't Jesus see the real us? Didn't Jesus see me for who I really am? Yes. And he still did it anyway. And if you take that truth and you drive it down into your heart, if you believe in Jesus Christ in such a way that you can be naked and unashamed before him, that you can say, "I'm a sinner, but I'm loved and covered anyway because of what Christ has done for me," then you'll finally have the power to go out into the world and be transparent. That doesn't mean you're going to blurt everything out, all right? But you'll no longer be haunted by yourself. You no longer feel two-faced. You won't always have to be flexing for everybody. Jesus was stripped so that you and I could be covered. Jesus was stripped so that you could be you. So let's continue to find our cover in him so that we can grow into the people we were created to be for each other. Amen.